Welcome to another episode of 9 to 5 Faith. I am joined today by Matt and Jos. They are a newly married couple who are sharing their insights, navigating faith, work, and how important it is to have community around us. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so excited. And I'm just noticing, what is that neon sign in the background?
So it says EAP. It stands for Every Effort Podcast. So just like Paige, we are podcasters.
I love it. And tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so our podcast focuses on all of the struggles that we face as young adults. Joslyn and I met right out of college trying to find that faith community, trying to find a church where it didn't feel like there were parents and, elderly people, but somewhere that we could be with people our age. And out of being in a Bible study and groups with people that age, we just had these really cool conversations because it's a unique stage of life where you have so much freedom and so much responsibility, but you don't know the answer to any of the questions. And so we just bring some of those conversations to people who don't have those groups in front of them.
I love that. Oh, that's so great. So great. And I also just like the EAP.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were to be on that podcast, I would use it as a battle cry. If you say something really affirming or positive, I'd be like, "Eep," or something like that.
That's a good idea. Maybe we'll try it.
Or just add it into your intro music or something like that. Anyways, no, that's really fun. So I love the topic of your guys' podcast, and I think it's so needed too. I actually I'm coming fresh off of last night. I was volunteering with our young adults at my church, and it was such a joy. And I'm glad that there are those spaces, but like you said, there's not always those spaces. So creating those spaces virtually through a podcast, it's really awesome. How long have you guys been podcasting for?
We're at about a year and a half now. So definitely new to it, new to life, but we are trying our best. And we like to say we make every effort. So our tagline is, we're so blessed, a little stressed, and making every effort to figure out the rest. So we're definitely in those beginning stages.
I love it. I mean, mine was February. So you guys are more senior than me at this point, but so make sure you guys go and subscribe and listen to the Every Effort podcast as well. Can you guys tell me a little bit about yourselves outside of the podcasting world?
Yeah, so I feel like the big thing we have to start with is we just got married 4 months ago. And I think today we just realized it's been 4 months. It feels like yesterday and also 5 years ago. So that's been a huge change in our life. We moved into a new place. Joslyn started a new job. We've just had so much change in these last few months, and it's been really cool. But I feel like who we are is we're just a young married couple. We love kind of this idea of basing our life around our community at church. So we serve in a young adult ministry. Obviously, we host this podcast, and we just love spending time with friends. We don't have hardcore hobbies that we go do all the time, but we'll go to the beach like we are this weekend. We'll go out to eat, check out new spots, and just really love exploring and seeing all of what's out here, especially in Southern California.
You guys are newlyweds. So I love it.
It says that, we're involved with church. We really feel like we're carrying a lot of the shoulders of our young adult ministry. And that's kind of where a lot of our heart came with the podcast too, is there's such a need there. But yeah, we try to be very active, going to work out, going to hang out with friends. We're in and out of the house a lot of times of the day, and especially on the weekends. But yeah, all of that and working full-time jobs. So
yeah. And what are those full-time jobs?
Yeah. So so Matt mentioned I just started a new job a couple months ago. I used to be a manufacturing engineer. I studied mechanical engineering. That was kind of where my whole world was. That's what I thought, I thought I was supposed to be doing that for a long time. And once I realized I didn't like it, and the wedding date was coming sooner, I'm like, well, I should try to find something that I would like a little bit more. I don't want to bring this into my marriage, because I was just waking up so unhappy every day going to work. And I did some research and found this career in patent law. So I'm currently a patent engineer. So I'm a writer like you. I just read more about the technical, dry stuff about computers and programming and artificial intelligence.
That's so awesome. And like, I am obsessed with that because my husband's actually a trademark lawyer. And so he gets a lot of like questions about patents. But like what you said, you have to actually have an engineering degree in order to be a patent attorney. So, there's that little bit. And he does not have that background. But I love it. I'm chomping at the bit. All right, Matt, what about you?
Yeah, so Joslyn just joined me in the work from home life. So I like to say that her conversations are like AI and machine learning, and I get to play with PowerPoints all day. So I'm in management consulting. So I work at an accounting firm, and coming out of college, I knew I wanted to do business, and business is such a wide array. And I really like the idea of consulting because it lets me do a bunch of different projects, or I get to work with new groups of people, just get exposure to a whole lot of different things. So what I've really specialized in is operational efficiency. So coming into an institution and just interviewing everyone and finding out like, what are your pain points? What are the things that make your job just that little bit more annoying? And how can we break down some of those barriers so that we can all do what we're passionate about?
I love that. Good job.
Well,
I feel like you guys both have like this more technical mind that works, but it's like very different. You guys like you technically operate in two different areas, which leads me to my next question, which is how do you get your creative outlet? Is it the podcast, or do you guys do something else?
For me, it's definitely the podcast. I do a lot of the pretty aesthetic stuff for it. And I mean, I never thought I would be in this position where I'm writing a ton at work and I'm writing a ton in this hobby. So yeah, definitely, trying to make like pretty posts, pretty videos. I think, making reels and TikToks have been a big focus for me. And yeah, I feel really proud when I make something that I can laugh at, and I just hope someone else can laugh at it too.
Yeah, my creative outlet is very similar. My creativity is much more limited. So for me, like producing the videos for a podcast has been a cool new challenge. And I get creativity in the context of problem solving. So like even for this call today, like figuring out how to get all the audio set up or figuring out how to edit videos, like learning those new things that are kind of a new experience for me is a good way to keep myself interested and keep that creativity going.
I love that. And one thing that I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you're a writer, so you're a creative. And I'm like, I'm not though. Like, I'm not a creative person. But like when I end up talking, I just like had therapy yesterday. And when I was talking about it, I was like, I sound like a creative person. Not that there's anything wrong with creative people, but also I just like don't resonate with that. But I had a friend one time who was like, what do you create? Like, that was her question to me. And I was like, I mean, I don't know. And she was like, we are all made in God's image and God is a creator. So what do you create? And I was like, oh, I love that. And so like that has helped me like accept the creative element a little bit more.
Right. That is true. I think social media has made the word creator sound exclusive, but it applies to everyone.
Yeah. Here's a fun story. When I my website a few eras ago, it had content creator before that was like an actual phrase. It had that on there because I was like, this is kind of like an all-encompassing, phrase that like fits me really well. Other than like social media guru, like no one wants to be called that. So I was like, oh, content creator. And then like OnlyFans came out and I was like, I don't want to call myself a content creator anymore. So I'm gonna axe that from my website. Yeah. So, OnlyFans ruining more than just, intimacy and whatever. Okay. That's a completely other topic for a completely other day, for a completely other podcast at that. So how have you, Jos, found yourself kind of like settling into your new job? I know like, especially not only a new job, but also working from home can present with its challenges.
Yeah. Well, I've always told Matt that I felt like I was born to stay inside all day. And so for me, transitioning to in-home was just a supernatural like shift. I prefer that so much more over, as a manufacturing engineer, like I go into work because things are being made and things don't work out when they're being made in real time. So all the problems would come to me as well. So a lot of bothering, a lot of movement, a lot of shifting around schedules and priorities. And so being able to have more control of that with my current job, it just fits my personality more. And I saw people in my last job who loved that. So that part is just a personality fit. But starting a new job that I knew nothing about, I had no experience in law, no experience in understanding, computer engineering. I hadn't programmed in years, and now I have to write and explain things in the most vague terms possible. You really have to understand something. This is a side point. You really have to understand something well in order to teach it and explain it. So a huge learning curve was hard. The first 2 or 3 months, which was pretty much 50% of my time at the job at this point, was, every other week or every other day, I would just be crying and praying because it was tough. And Matt knows, he was there and he encouraged me and told me, if you got to take the day off, that's fine. Really pace yourself. And I think I've just been so hard on myself when it comes to work that it was definitely a hard transition, and still can be at times. But yeah, starting something new has never come easy for me. And I definitely see why starting new jobs is a stressful thing in life.
Yeah. You guys hit the 3 big stressors of life. They say the 3 big stressors of life are moving, job changes, and getting married. So congratulations. You guys hit all of those in the past 6 months, probably. So, but I am glad that you are finding yourself in a position that is really fitting for you. And I feel like, when that happens, it's just the puzzle pieces just snap into place and it just feels so right. So that's really, really awesome that you have found yourself in that place. And I hear you on the work from home stuff too. There's some days, and if I don't go to the gym or work in my garden, I'm like, ooh, I did not go outside today.
Yeah.
Very easy to have that happen. I try not to, though. Now, Matt, your job sounds very stuffy, if I am completely honest. Management and PowerPoints at an accounting firm. Help me understand kind of what the environment and what the culture is that you work in. And also you're obviously a very, lively, outgoing person. You can't really host a podcast if you're not, in my opinion. But how does that kind of pair well with what you do every single day?
Yeah, so I think what's made a really big difference is the culture of the company I work with. I really love that it's so much more dynamic and collaborative than I expected. Coming out of college, I looked at all the accounting firms, and it's obviously really tempting to go for the most prestigious or the biggest, but I had a lot of people really encourage me to go with what felt like the best cultural fit. And I found it's so cool that coming in as a new staff member, older people on my team were so welcoming into kind of higher level conversations, or just holding meetings as if everyone didn't have a rank, as if we're all just people coming to a table and you have this expertise or perspective and I have this one, and how can we work together to solve the problem? So I feel like that collaborative approach and kind of genuinely caring about where everyone is coming from has made a really big difference in taking out some of what you mentioned, the stuffiness or the dryness of work. But when everyone's coming to the table and wanting to work together, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and that's just my own perspective too of accounting. Good. I work in social media and marketing. Accounting is I say the only reason I wasn't a business major is because I would have to take economics and statistics. So there's
and those were my favorite classes. So
there you go.
Honestly, I didn't really understand what Matt did until a year into dating him. So the best way I described it, the most of what he's been working on has been with banks. And so I call him a bank doctor because he'll go to banks, figure out what's wrong with them, and try to make it better, literal physical banks. He'd figure out their processes and be like, okay, let's get a team of people to figure it out. And nobody's an expert, which is crazy. They're just brains that are being hired to figure out a solution.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's awesome. Now, and I have my questions are going to like hit a different tone because you guys are newlyweds, and like I'm sure that that adds another layer of complexity. But it sounds like you guys have been involved in your like church community for a while now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we met about 3 years ago in our church community. And when I joined the community, Joslyn was leading a study, and then eventually we were leading a study together, and it just became this cool thing where we jumped in. But I think it's been about 3 years now.
That's adorable. You guys are so cute. I can't get over it. So in what ways, with like you guys both working full time, how have you been able to really integrate and like make a priority your church community and making sure, you guys are learning about each other in marriage, but also and working full time, and then on top of that, doing the whole church thing?
Google Calendar. Like that, like we plan everything. If it's a date night, if it's, calling a friend or family member, church on Sunday is a non-negotiable. Like we commit to things that we know already fit in our schedule, first of all. And I always tell people to use Google Calendar. There's no excuse for anyone to be late. And I'm usually late on Sundays, but there's grace in that, I think.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry, Paige. We have an alarm going off in our room. I'm just going to go stop.
Okay. Yeah, wait. I'll pause. I will say that was your Google Calendar telling you that this interview is happening. You can call it that. Matt, do you have anything to add to kind of how you make sure like your church community is a priority in what you guys do?
Yeah, I think the calendar is the first thing that came to mind for me, but I think behind the mechanics of the calendar, it's the conversations between us about what is really important and what we want to prioritize. And I think making sure that we have time for those things and making sure that we can move things around if needed. Like, I think we communicate enough to where we understand what little things we can move around versus those big church events or quality time with friends or whatever it is that is kind of that non-negotiable that we just need to figure out a way around those. So I think being on the same page has been really helpful. And then also having something practical like the calendar that we can share, we can know what's going on, and then we can plan a little bit better.
I think the non-negotiable piece is huge, especially in having that communication between a husband and a wife, and partners and family, even when, if ever there's kids involved in anything, like having those non-negotiables of like, if we do nothing else this week, these things are getting done. I think that is so huge, and it helps kind of equalize everything in terms of like where priorities are set, because I have my priorities, my husband has his priorities, but also like what are our priorities together as a couple?
Yeah, and I think especially getting involved in a church community, that intentionality has made such a big difference. Like, I haven't just grown close to the people that I click with personality wise, but the people who also make it a priority to be at events or to be intentional about growing. Like, we just naturally have grown so close to those people because we all make it a priority to spend time together or be in community, whatever that looks like for each of them. It's done wonders in creating the community that we're all looking for.
Yeah. And I'd argue to say too, like, I think that finding that is rare, and at least in my experience of the availability of that, because I can make it a priority, to meet with a spiritual mentor or meet with some girlfriends or something like that. But if they're not holding it as a priority either, then it is a one-sided relationship, and that is never a good recipe for anyone, in my opinion.
Yeah. And honestly, we have honestly felt that way within like some groups at our church too, where it's like, you know what, our presence might matter to somebody, even if us and that other person are the only people who show up. And that's something that we have to keep in mind too. Like, if we're not at least showing up for ourselves and at most, or at least, right, God, then, there could be someone there who might just need to see a friend and just be asked like how they're doing. So there's just so many souls involved, I think, in just showing up. We actually did have an episode about that too, of showing up to church.
Yeah, that's huge. And I actually again, encountered that just last night. I really did not want to go volunteering yesterday. I really did not want to. I was grumpy. I had a headache coming on. I was tired. And I mean, young adults at our church starts at 7 p.m. I'm like, I need to get in bed by 8. Like, that is my vibe. But I also love to do it. The prayer team for the young adults is kind of just starting and developing and expanding. And they're trying to get the young adults who attend to be more receptive to the prayer team of like, hey, you need help, you need support in some way, like come access the prayer team. And there were 6 of us last night. And I don't say this of anything of my own power or strength, or I did not do anything. It was all God. But we were standing on the sides kind of during closing worship. And this one gal out of everyone in the room came up to me and asked for prayer. And I just saw it as it was God's way of like redeeming that like tiredness that I was feeling. Because I don't think anyone else walked up to anyone else to ask for prayer. And this individual who I did not know, we have a pretty like 300 young adults maybe every week. And this one person who I did not know came up to me and asked me for prayer. And it was just like so beautiful that was God's way of kind of redeeming that moment of community. So like you were saying, Joss, like, there's so many souls and maybe it's just that one person.
Right. No, I'm really glad to hear that you're part of like volunteering for the young adult group. Like, as 2 young adults who are looking for people like you in our area to just volunteer for our group, like whether you hear it or not, like just thank you. Like, thank you for being a part of that group and helping them out.
I love it. I love volunteering, not for anything else other than like, I think it's a little bit of my people pleaser self, like that I like to make other people happy. And so like when they were placing me on the volunteer team, they were asking me, oh, what team do you want to serve? I'm like, honestly, just put me where you need me. Like, I have no preference. Like, I just want to be here. And so, that makes me happy. One thing I want to hit on though, because I've never talked about this, but an ongoing thread that I have had with almost every single one of my interviews, and you guys are like probably like interview like 50 or 60 at this point, has been the calendar and has been scheduling time. And I feel like I want to talk about that because I think there is a stigma around scheduling your time with God. Talk about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've thought of a very similar thought with scheduling intentional time in our relationship. And at first I thought, well, that makes it feel unnatural, or that makes it feel like it's not genuine. But I think that makes it important and that makes it intentional. Like, I think it is an act of service to set aside time. And for me, setting aside time in, quote unquote, a calendar, or for me as part of my morning routine, is that I can give the best part of my day to God if I plan for it. And if I don't plan for it, I'm much more likely to be reading my Bible half asleep, like right before I'm going to bed. And so for me, what might be lost or doesn't feel quite right about how natural it is kind of mitigated by how important I can make it. And if I instill that, then I'm much more likely to follow through with it. I'm much more likely to make it kind of a regular part of my routine, to where now if I start my day with that one-on-one time with God, now I'm reminded to pray throughout the day, or to come back to that conversation, or just have some worship music playing. Like, I think that intentionality sets you up for a lot more of those natural moments that I get that concern about having the calendar.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why there is that stigma. And I think it's because of the strict start and stop time with God, as if like I can only talk to God and communicate with him if it's between 10:05 and 10:15 a.m.
Right.
But that's not true. And at the same time, like everything that we do is a spiritual act, right? Like there are, there's the unseen realms that, we cannot perceive or understand. There's God working in everything that we do, right? And all things do it for the glory of God, right? Whether it's scheduling time to clean your bathroom or to work. And those also might not have start and stop times. I can finish my work and still be thinking about it later, and that's not on the calendar, but I can process it with God. And so the same way that we have like this intimate time with God, I personally don't put it on the calendar, but I'm like, maybe I should. But yeah, I'm like, it doesn't start and stop. That's just a time where you do a specific action like journaling or reading just to make time for it. And you can still be thinking and pondering and treasuring everything that you've studied throughout the day. It doesn't stop just because the calendar does.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never taken that perspective on it. My perspective is a lot of like, is very legalistic to be like, oh, this is my time. And like, it's a check thing that I take off my list every day. So, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like this is when it starts and stops. I've never thought of that before, but I also think like, there's the legalism aspect, but Matt, I loved what you said of like, it's an act of service. I've never really thought of that before. And that's really beautiful of like, it's an act of service to set aside this time for, whether it be your significant other or for God. Because again, it's just like demarcating like this time is dedicated to this one thing. And that's not to say I can't do that one thing ever throughout the rest of the day.
I've heard of therapists on podcasts who recommend scheduling like even intimate time with your spouse on a calendar. And a lot of people are like, how does that work? Like, shouldn't it be spontaneous and like unexpected and more natural? And it's like, I'm being married now. I'm starting to see like, well, maybe it does work that way, like we are always planning everything, whether it's on a calendar or not, right? You can go on a date with your husband or wife and be like, maybe we can lead towards this direction and end up happy at the end of the night or something like that.
Yeah, I think of it as just something that is like anything else is extra. So like, the things that are on my calendar are the fundamental basics, building blocks of what I need to get me through the day or the week. And, scheduling time with your spouse is one of those things of what are the fundamental building blocks of a healthy work life, a healthy relationship life, a healthy spiritual life. Like my gym is on my calendar because one, I don't want people to book over it. And like me lose that time in the day. But also because it's a priority to me and it's a reminder of like, hey, this is like when you need to get your butt into the gym. Same with kind of what we were talking about with, spending time with God of like, hey, this is like the bare bones basic, what you need to get you through the day.
Right.
Matt, do you have anything to add?
There needs to be like, there also needs to be a level of flexibility too, even with scheduling. Because if you're just focused on your plan and your goals and what you want to do, you're never going to be living for God and what He has planned for you. There's some pretty extreme people out there, like David Goggins, who's like, you hear that alarm, like I'm already up out the door, like he's just very like all or nothing.
Yeah.
And that's not really like a life of grace either. Like we have to accept that life isn't perfect. In ourselves and in the things that we decide to do doesn't turn out the way we plan. And being able to be at peace about rescheduling your life is so much more important, I think, than sticking to like a strict regimen. And like you said, like being legalistic, I think that hurts you at the end emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. I think of Mark Wahlberg where he's like, I wake up at 3 a.m. and go to the gym. And I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I believe sleep is God-given because it doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense, I usually think it's God. Because why would we sleep half our lives away? Why? Because we need it. And anyways, there's a book somewhere back here that's why we sleep. And it's like scientists are still like dumbfounded of why humans need as much sleep as
I
we
heard
do.
before the invention of the light bulb, people, or at least Americans, used to sleep 10 hours a night on average, which is crazy. And Matt, I realized I can't stick to Matt's sleeping schedule because I feel way better with an extra hour. We used to go to the gym together at the same time, and now I just say goodbye. An extra hour.
No, that's a big lesson we've learned. We've been doing a couples marriage study with another newlywed couple, and that's been such a big theme for me so far, is that we can both have healthy routines or spiritual routines that look completely different. Like, I need a different amount of sleep. Joslyn worships a different way. We both have our daily time with God a different way. And I think it's really easy to look at that and say, oh, well, my way is the right way, or that's the way that gets me close to God. But we need to be more acknowledging that there's all kinds of different ways. Like, we were just talking to someone who like sings as their time alone with God, and that horrifies me. But that's what brings them close. Like, that is their spiritual connection.
Yeah, that's huge and absolutely true. My husband and I, we learned a lot of that. Well, I learned a lot of it, especially in the beginning, because part of like my health issues and everything, like I have to manage it with like my nutrition and with my food. I'm a meat eater and I drink alcohol. My husband does not. And so like, especially when we got married in the beginning, like I was working with my nutritionist and she was just like, your needs are not your husband's needs. And I was like, oh yeah. Like she just like said it in a way. I was like, oh yeah, like we don't have to be saying like eating the exact same meals in order. Yes, it's easier, but also like we have different nutritional needs. And like you said, our worship looks different and our quiet times might look different. And Joss, I completely resonate with you with the getting up early and going off to the gym because I am in that same boat where I'm like, I need my sleep.
Yeah.
My husband's up at like 5 or 6 a.m. and he takes our dogs on a walk and I am still sleeping until like 8 or 9.
Yeah. I think my wake up time before moving in with Matt when we got married was definitely before or after 6 a.m. And I've had to compensate a little bit. And I mean, I wake up earlier than I used to still, but to me 6:30 is sleeping in.
I gotta give you guys props. It's good that you're learning these lessons now because they're hard lessons and not everyone learns them. My big thing is like we go to bed together. He goes to sleep. I sit and read on my phone or whatever while he sleeps because I don't go to bed at 8:30. I go to bed, but I am not sleeping.
Yeah, Matt is like one of my main sources of entertainment. So if he's asleep, I have nothing else to do.
I love it. So one thing that I like to talk about on the podcast is just having a moment of like realness and vulnerability. And like if anyone's listening to this who is like not a Christian or has like a sour view of Christians in the past, first of all, I'm sorry you have. But also like we don't have it all together. And so like my love-hate question is, what is one thing that you guys struggle with in your spiritual discipline? What do you struggle with every day? You know, is it finding that quiet time? Is it remembering to pray? Is it wanting to serve at church or not wanting to, like me yesterday?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is evangelism. Like, I think that idea of sharing my faith is so hard because I've seen how much it's changed my life. Like when I was younger, I really struggled with depression and just feeling lonely and just feeling so isolated, even though I had a lot of people around me. And through my walk of faith and coming to know Christ, it changed that so much to where my surroundings didn't even look that different, but the way I perceived them, the hope I saw, like the beauty I was able to find in little things changed so much. And I have such a desire to share that with people. But I'm, like you said earlier, I'm a people pleaser. Like, it is hard for me to bring up anything that could be a little controversial or abrasive. And so that's one of the things that I feel so called to do as a Christian, and I struggle with so much. So one thing that I've really learned is to give so much more grace when I see people trying to share, and I think, oh, that doesn't seem like the right way to do it. That doesn't seem natural. And it's really hard to do because it's so hard to know where someone's heart is or what the right way to approach them is. And so I've tried to see it more as just a beautiful thing of, like, if I discovered this brand new restaurant that had a great deal on food, I would want to share that with everybody I knew. And I might not know the right way to share that or the right way to, quote, sell that to them, because I don't know their needs. But I'm really seeing the heart in the people who really do try to get out there and share, and trying to learn from a little bit of that boldness.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, for me, it's been being still, I think, spiritually. So I mentioned my last job was pretty hectic. I grew up in a fast-paced home environment where everyone had very strong and loud feelings. And I went to a pretty intense college. Engineering school doesn't extend your life by any means. So just kind of different stressors in life that made me think that I need to always be doing something. I need to be productive and efficient. So finding time to be still, to pray, and to journal is really hard for me. Like, I get really distracted, like, very easily when I try to stay still. I've even told myself before, for example, before journaling, I'll be like, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone. And then I realize I end up looking at my phone after I'm already looking at it. I'm like, how did this happen? I said I wasn't going to do this. So I have to move stuff around to not get distracted, because my mind is just always moving around and always thinking. And it truly is, I think, a gift and a skill to learn to not think of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard it put one way that I really liked of when Christians talk about meditation versus other religions and faith practices, other faith practices, when it's meditation, it's emptying of yourself. Whereas for Christians, it's getting filled up and focusing on one thing, which is God. So if that is helpful for you, that was something helpful for me with meditation. Because I'm like you, I got a little Energizer bunny going in my brain at all times. And so, just being quiet and still and meditating. I'm actually, my office, if you saw the rest of my office, it's even messier than what is back here right now. And it's because I'm creating a prayer closet right now where I could literally just shut myself in the closet. So I am not bothered by the mess that is my office on a regular basis.
I thought it looked nice back there.
Oh, thank you.
Thing looks like it's supposed to be there.
You would see a half-eaten salad, a few drink receptacles, a Topo Chico, a rag. It's fun in here. How long have you guys both been in the workforce, full-time workforce?
So we both graduated from college 2020 and started fall of 2020. So this is about 3 years in.
3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So still fresh enough. What was the biggest shock to your system when you went from college full-time or schooling and everything like that into full-time work?
For me, it was the workplace dynamic. We graduated right when COVID started. And so I expect to be working remotely, and I was working remotely. And I found myself so caught in just banging my head up against the wall when I would run into an issue. And I was very socially anxious, and I was so worried about sending an email or asking for help and seeming like I didn't know the answer. But then I struggled with that internally because I just started this job. Of course, I don't know all the answers, but there's so much pride, and I feel like I just got this job and I have this degree. I should know everything. And once I was able to take the first couple steps, the responses were so positive, and people were so helpful and willing to share some wisdom. And I think as I've gotten further away from that, I've realized how much we miss from working remote. Not that the remote work is the problem, but not connecting with other people regularly, and not getting to learn from that manager who's done this for 5 years and just seeing how they think through things, or seeing that they're often asking for help. And so that journey of not just building confidence in my abilities, but building the confidence to say, I don't know this. Can you show me how to do this? Can you give me a little bit more context? Like, I think in school, the problem sets we were given always were complete. We always had all the details we needed. There was never need for clarification. And in the workforce, things are so dynamic that you almost always need understanding from someone. You need to ask a question back and forth. Like, I think I had this expectation that I would receive a task, I would complete it, I would send it back, and that would just happen over and over. But the workplace is just so much more dynamic, and we need to lean on each other so much more than I was comfortable with.
That's a really good observation. Oh my gosh. If any educators are out there, only for some of that, because I think like that is so true of like needing information and pursuing information, because very few times have I gone to go do something and everything I needed is right there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that's what we expect of ourselves. And that's where a lot of that imposter
that's how we're educated.
Right. Yeah. And like, even working with people too. I mean, they say that college prepares you to work with people when you do that one project, right, at the end of a class. But you also get to choose more times than not who you're going to work with. And everyone is in the same stage of life for the most part as you. And when you go to work somewhere and you're the youngest person there, and different people tell you how to do the same thing in different ways, having to debate, like, which way do I actually do it? And like, at what point do I want to advocate for one way or my own way to do something? Like, it just feels like, there's no right answer to things out there. And that's how we're trained. The other thing I would add is like, people that you work with who have, been working for a long time, not necessarily at the same company, they have a different mentality when it comes to approaching coworkers in some places. Like, you can tell they're in it for the long haul. So for them to talk to someone in the hallway is like no big deal. And as a young person, you're like, I need to get this thing done. This is on my to-do list. Like, you don't really think like those interactions that will build friendship and your relationship with people. Not everything is, a strict deadline is what I would say to someone who's entering the workforce.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I know, if you work salary versus hourly, like that's a different conversation. But I remember when I first started working, I needed to be there at 8 and I needed to clock out at 5. And like, it was like, felt very, very strict. And I remember there was one day where I needed to get home earlier than usual I can't remember what it was. And I was leaving. It was like 4:15. And like, I mean, I wasn't sneaking out or anything. I was just like, I need to jump early. I'm salary. Like, it's not a big deal. And I remember I like walked out of the office and then I get a text or like a Slack or something from my boss asking me for something. And I like had to stop what I was doing, pull out my laptop, find a table somewhere out and like sit down and like get her what she was asking for. I was like, this is what I get for leaving early. But anyways, I was just like this moment where I was like, oh, but then also like workplace culture heavily dictates that rule, because like I remember when I first started at this tech company, not the one I'm at currently, but when I first started there and we were in office, I was of the mentality like, you're the first to be there and you're the last to leave. Like, that was kind of the discipline that I had. And my coworker was like, no, like once you're done with your work, leave. Like,
Uh-huh.
and then everyone kind of adopted that. And so, yeah, I think it is like heavily cultural as well, with depending
Yeah,
on where you work.
you really don't know what you're getting into. Like,
Not at all. I wish there was like a proper interview question when you're getting interviewed for places that you could ask them back, be like, so how many hours do you really work?
right.
Or, what if someone needs to take off early? What is your policy there? So, for sure, for sure. Thank you guys so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight and letting me take a little glimpse into newlywed life, because that's a few years behind me at this point, and it's adorable and I love it. And I'm so happy that you guys have found your rhythm and your flow and like digging deep into your faith, but also your community. I think that especially over the past few years, we've been longing for community so much. And there have been artificial ways that people have tried to kind of replicate that and duplicate it. But none are satisfactory, because the real true community comes in like with the church and with like fellowship with other people. So that's all I have to say about that. Little steps off soapbox. So one question I always like to finish our conversation with is, what is one thing our listeners can do, an action item that they can take away to help grow their faith, to help grow their walk with God, that they can do today, tomorrow, next week, next month, whenever they're listening to this? What is one thing that they can do to help them walk with God?
This is something I shared with a friend recently, and it's because it's helped me a lot with figuring out this new job and all these new things in life. Every morning, usually when I feel kind of like I don't have a sense of direction, I don't know where my life is headed, I ask God, like, what do you want me to do today? What is one or two things? And I just try to listen to what that is. And more often than not, he tells me, go to work and just do what you need to do at work. Show up for that, or, go apologize to Matt about this thing. Or, go work out, or don't go work out. Like, just take it easy on yourself today. And that has really helped, like just focusing on that day. Because once I know what God wants me to do for the day, I really feel like I've already won that day. And all I have to do is execute.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Matt?
Yeah, I feel like I have the flip side of that, which has probably helped keep our marriage together, is putting on some worship music and just going for a walk, going for a run. I don't know what type of thinker or learner it makes me, but I can't just sit still and focus on something. So if I'm moving, if I have something playing in my ears, that is the time that I can really connect with God. And like Joslyn, reflect on where I'm at. Like what brokenness am I showing in this conflict I might have at work, or why am I struggling with this thing? And having something kind of going by while I'm walking, while I'm hearing worship music playing, like that environment for me just feels right, where it creates a space where I might not be able to have that trying to sit still or trying to focus really intently. But if I just dedicate some very unstructured time and just say, I'm just going to walk and be with God, I don't know where it's going to lead me, that has really changed my relationship from trying to just sit down with a Bible and pray for a few minutes into like this kind of physical and spiritual journey that you can go on and really reconnect.
The image that I had in my mind when you said that, it takes me to like the TikTok or Facebook videos of the gal. I think it's like one gal, but I think it's kind of a trend where people tell her in the comments, like, run until you see 3 pink trees. She's like, all right, here I go. She's a runner, and she'll just like run, and like she films her entire journey until she finds 3 pink trees or 5 yellow cars or something like that. And that's just kind of what it reminded me of. It's kind of like choose your own adventure with God in the morning. And that's absolutely awesome. Well, where can people find you besides subscribing to your awesome podcast? People want to connect with you.
Yeah, the easiest way is Instagram. We're at Every Effort Podcast. If we're also on TikTok, so if you're on TikTok, that works.
Yeah.
Facebook, and YouTube, but Instagram is kind of the main hub.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been an absolute blast, and I'm sure the people listening are getting so much out of you guys and your wisdom and kind of guidance and all of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paige. I really, really love that you focus on the workplace, and I love the name of your podcast. And it's not something that's talked
about. Even though it's a lie. 9 to 5 isn't true. Right? Like when I became an adult, 9 to 5, like everyone, Miss Dolly Parton, 9 to 5. It's not true. It's 8 to 5. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying.
That's true.
So true.
That is
8 to 5 just didn't have the same ring.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe, leave 5 stars, and then head on over to Matt and Jos's podcast and subscribe and leave them 5 stars too. And we will catch you guys next week.